You're listening to The Weather Junkies.
Oh boy. Large wedge tornado coming up into Tuscaloosa. A winter storm warning is in effect for our area.
Snow, we can expect at least another 2 to 4 inches overnight. Then that snow.
The National Weather Service in Huntsville has issued a tornado warning for northwestern Massachusetts.
14 to 22 inches of snow!
Good Thursday evening, and thank you for joining us on the Weather Junkies. I am Tyler Jankowski, joining the show from the Champlain Valley alongside Dakota Smith in Colorado. Dakota.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Tyler. Thanks for joining us tonight. Still in the monsoon right now in Colorado. Not as rainy as it was the past few weeks, but we're still getting those afternoon thunderstorms. It's a little cooler than it was. We are getting into kind of the later part of August, so that's to be expected, but can't complain too much out here. Weather is pretty good. Tyler, how about in the Champlain Valley?
It's been pretty nice. We've had a lot of those. Well, I mean, I guess I'm new as a resident up here, but beautiful days with no humidity and temperatures in the 70s. I guess in Connecticut, that's more of a September thing, but up here, it starts a little bit earlier, so I suppose the first flakes will be in late September or early October, but I don't want to think about that yet. But yeah, it's been beautiful, and I'm really enjoying it. I still don't have air conditioning where I am, and I think I've made it through the summer, or I think I will.
Nice.
So
That's great. You mentioned first flakes. We already had our first flakes at about 14,000 feet over here. So winter is coming already. We should get our first snowfall. Or first snow sometime in October. That's kind of the normal late October. So yeah, I kind of wish it would stay warmer longer, but that's just how it is.
As you know, football season's almost here, so that'll cure all the problems. I'll be happy when that arrives.
Yeah, me too. Our
trending in the Weatherverse segment starts with a tweet from the Weather Prediction Center tonight, and that tweet says the latest update on the cloud cover forecast for the total solar eclipse next Monday, and they have a map that has different shades of gray and blue on it, and it looks like the forecast is pretty clear in the Pacific Northwest away from the coast. So actually along the path of totality, the clearest part, according to this map, is in the Pacific Northwest. So we'll have to see how that works out.
Yeah, I think we're actually looking pretty good. I think most of the country is going to luck out. You know, of course, there's going to be areas where there are clouds, especially in the southeast. The eclipse will be in most of the southeast, kind of around 1 or 2, and I have a feeling there'll be some thunderstorms down there, and you're bound to get some interference there. But otherwise, looking pretty good. I know the Rocky Mountains in Wyoming and Nebraska is going to be a pretty popular spot. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Glad it's going to turn out well.
I'll be happy with half the sun covered in my location. I'm not going on any excursion.
Don't look at it.
No, I plan to use binoculars. Didn't I tell you? I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. Our next tweet comes from Philip Klotzbach, and it's a satellite loop. But the text is interesting. He says, Gert is the 74th consecutive Atlantic hurricane since the last major landfall in the U.S., and that is Wilma in 2005. The old record, 36-Brett, he says, in 1999. Brett to Charlie in 2004. Is that 36 storms? I'm not sure.
Yeah, presumably so. Yeah. That crushed the record.
Yeah, so a long time ago.
Yeah, because that record only lasted or it was only a 5-year span. And we are in a 12-year span now?
Well, in last year we had such a close. Was it last year the close call in Florida
Matthew,
with
yeah.
Matthew? Yeah, it was like so close, a
Yeah.
wobble away.
Yeah.
But our final tweet tonight is a tweet from climatologist49. He is in Alaska, and this tweet was selected by Dakota. It's a map of paths of future total solar eclipses in Alaska for the next 300 years. One spot will have 5. Are you familiar with that spot in purple, Dakota?
No, I'm not. It's kind of on the, I don't know what they call that. It's like the Aleutian Islands kind of, but not quite an island. It's still attached to the mainland.
It looks like it's a little ways west of Kodiak.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable how we have these projections out for that far. Yeah, so lucky for those. I don't know how many people live there. Probably not very many, but of course, this is kind of really far in the future. So I'm assuming someone is physically incapable of seeing all 5 of them.
It goes all the way to 2316, so hundreds of years into the future.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible, though. Great map by Brian. He makes a lot of good maps. Not always Alaska centric. Normally they're U.S. centric, but this one in particular is really cool.
Exciting times. Excited for the eclipse. The first one that I'll be able to take in. So we'll see how Monday works out. It should be mainly clear, but our main segment this week is a very exciting one. We're very happy to have Dr. Kevin Kloesel on the show. He is the university meteorologist for the University of Oklahoma. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here.
We're so happy to have you, and it's summer and it's thunderstorm season, so we're bound to have a fruitful conversation.
Yeah, it's been pretty active down here, actually. Sometimes we think August is the new May here in central Oklahoma. We've had severe weather almost every other night for the past week.
Wow. So before we get into the meat of things, we like to have our listeners and even Dakota and I get a background on our guests. So why don't you take us through your early days and how you got interested in meteorology and where you went to school and just some information about those early years before we get started.
Sure. Well, those folks around here in Norman will know that I am the diehard Texas Longhorn in central Oklahoma. Have a degree from the University of Texas and born and raised in Austin, and kind of have a convergence of several stories as a kid, of course. Loving baseball as a passion, and trying to figure out why we couldn't play when it rained, when of course you could play soccer, you could play football, you could play just about anything else, but not baseball. So that curiosity. But I also have a great aunt who was ordained into the ministry, became a nun in 1898. Her first assignment was in Galveston at the Ursuline Convent. And so she lived through the Galveston hurricane in 1900, unfortunately to die shortly thereafter in the public health crisis, which came after the hurricane hit. So have some family connections to one of the greatest weather disasters of all time.
And so you're the university meteorologist right now at the University of Oklahoma. What were some of your first jobs out of college?
Well, I went to grad school, went to Penn State for master's and PhD right out of college. I did some work in college, working with the Texas Air Control Board on various things. But my first job was faculty at Florida State University in Tallahassee, and I was there for about 10 years. It was in Florida where I met one of the emergency management directors in the state of Florida, Craig Fugate, who ultimately became the director of FEMA. And so I started at that point realizing that both on an educational basis as well as on a response basis, that we had a long way to go in terms of weather support for emergency operations, for venues, for almost everything you could imagine, from the Little League Baseball, of course, with the World Series going on in Williamsport this week. And in 1999, I traded hurricanes for tornadoes, and I've been at the University of Oklahoma for 18 years. So, and it's been a wonderful 18 years, despite the razzing that I get for being a Longhorn in the middle of central Oklahoma. It has been an amazing 18 years. I've got probably more support at my university for what I do than in any place I've ever been.
That's part of what fascinates us. Did you start there 18 years ago as the university meteorologist?
No, I started there as staff working with emergency management on a training program called OK First, and that program is run out of the Oklahoma Climate Survey. I'm the director of the Climate Survey at this time, but that particular program won the Innovations in American Government Award almost 2 decades ago from the Ford Foundation and Harvard University. And so the Oklahoma folks have been pretty visionary as it pertains to emergency management. I kind of worked my way up through the administrative ladder of a university. I was in the dean's office for a while. And about 2006, so it was 11 years ago, I started thinking that, wow, we really need daily weather support for all of the events on campus, everything from athletics to graduation ceremonies. So in 2006, I pitched an idea about a university meteorologist on our campus. In 2007, I pitched that idea again, and in 08, 9, 10, 11, 12. Ultimately, as you know, things go, we had the horrifying tornado disaster in 2013 where 7 students at a local elementary school in Moore, Oklahoma were killed in a tornado. And I think that really raised the consciousness at the University of Oklahoma that, okay, that could have been us, and the fatalities could have been our kids. And so the idea that was born in 2006 came to fruition in 2014, and I have been the university meteorologist for 3 years.
So it seems like that may be an unfortunate theme in weather event advice and emergency management, where something bad has to happen before you get what you need or want.
That is ubiquitous with meteorology. That is the way it works. Because we can never pinpoint when the next disaster will occur, people tend to wait until it occurs. And of course, the mantra I preach is that hope is not a plan. And a lot of people just kind of wait and say, well, you know, if it happens to us, we'll deal with it at that time. So for example, Katrina, I mean, that was what happened in Katrina was known. There was an exercise prior to Katrina called Hurricane Pam, a tabletop activity. And if folks in policy-making positions had taken the advice from the emergency management community after that exercise, yes, they would have spent a lot of money on mitigation and things like that. However, they didn't, and so they wound up paying almost 7 times that amount in the multiple billions of dollars that they had to pay out in recovery after the fact. And that's pretty much the way we operate as a society. We wait until something bad happens. It's called Sandy supplemental for a reason. That bill didn't get passed before Sandy to shore up coastlines and things like that. We waited until after Sandy, called it a Sandy supplemental, and then threw billions of dollars at it. And we continue to do that, and it continues to get this country more and more in debt.
So before we move on to some real life examples that we've seen in the last few years, can you tell us a little bit about what you actually do in your role as?
Sure. The kinds of things that we do at the University of Oklahoma is, one, we make sure that every single outdoor event has a weather plan. And that weather plan consists of monitoring the weather for that event, a safety coordinator on site for the event to ensure that the information gets to the event, and then a plan to shelter depending upon what that event is. And so if the event has food outside, hot dogs, hamburgers, etc., that's going to have a different set of considerations than if it has tents, temporary structures, bouncy houses, you name it, all the way to a football game with 90,000 people in a stadium and 100,000 more in tents outside doing tailgating. So we monitor the weather 24/7 for every single event on our campus. We're at approximately 250 events that we support during the year. And then during the summertime, we support every day for all of our youth camps. We have another 40,000 students that come to our campus during the summertime. and we support all of their activities since most of them are outdoors as well. So it's a daily, around-the-clock, 365-day a year, everything from lightning to tornado sheltering to campus closure in the face of ice and snow.
You know, it sounds like that's a role that should be more common throughout our nation's universities. I mean, anyone can list a number of times that their university didn't cancel when they probably should have. So kudos to be in that role, because that sounds very, very important. I want to, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but I agree with your brilliant idea. There are really only about 5 or 6 of us around the country. The University of Texas at Austin, Troy Kimmel does the work there. Nate Johnson at NC State. Marshall Shepard has done a lot of work at the University of Georgia. James Spann does some work for Alabama Athletics. Ed Bensman at Notre Dame. So there are folks that are out there in this community that are working with universities. But when you think about 5 universities having this kind of service, and there are 4,000 campuses, brick and mortar campuses in this country, we have a long, long way to go.
Yes.
So it's on that note, the Penn State president, Eric Barron, actually, he's a new president. He's been there for, I don't know, a few years now, and he has a meteorology background. And for the first time, they canceled class in like 40 years, and that was when he became president. And he kind of has a sense for these things, and I'm pretty sure it was a good call when they canceled.
Right. Eric has been a leader in our field for a very long period of time. He's been at a lot of various universities, has a tremendous amount of experience. And I would say he would be at the forefront of, and I know John Neese there at Penn State has also helped out on numerous occasions with those decisions as well. But to my knowledge, they do not have a dedicated position in their emergency preparedness office that does that kind of support 24/7.
That's mind-blowing to me, but we'll move on here. I want to bring up something that comes up on the show quite often and is kind of a burning problem in the weather world, and that is Major League Baseball and how they handle weather. So I'm going to really quick, just to kind of give a background, I'm going to read part of the Major League Baseball handbook. It's Rule 4.03E. That rule says, as soon as the home team's batting order is handed to the umpire-in-chief, the umpires are in charge of the playing field, and from the moment, the umpire-in-chief shall have sole authority to determine when a game shall be called, suspended, or resumed on the account of weather or conditions of the playing field. Kevin, why is this an issue for Major League Baseball?
Oh my gosh, can of worms you have opened, and I will go one step farther than your Rule 403E text and note that in the Major League Baseball rule book there is a comment section below Rule 403 that says the umpire-in-chief shall at all times try to complete a game.
Yikes.
And so what has happened here is that Major League Baseball has put the safety of fans, of players, of umpires, of grounds crews in the hands of individuals who are already incredibly busy inning by inning. And this makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. We have the capability, the detection capabilities. We have the expertise. The expertise exists. Many teams have hired meteorologists to help with their operations around the time, because before the game starts, it's up to the home team. And so if you have sort of the fortunate timing of having storms before the game ever starts, then a professional meteorologist is likely to be able to make a good decision to protect all of the folks that are at the stadium. And it is going to take, I believe, unfortunately, a fatality at a major league ballpark. And when it happens, you will have so many people in the meteorology community wanting to be on the stand in that trial to say, you know, we knew this was coming, and you are negligent. Your duty of care, in a legal sense, is to have the best available plan, and having a non-professional meteorologist called an umpire in charge of weather is flat out negligent, and it's going to cost Major League Baseball in the millions of dollars when that disaster happens.
What are some individual cases that you can recall that have been particularly problematic in terms of weather in Major League Baseball games?
I think particularly problematic. There are multiple YouTube videos out there. I mean, all you have to do is search on, Major League Baseball weather, Major League Baseball lightning, Major League Baseball wind, all of those things. And I think one of the biggest issues that we have is that in many instances, the hazard manifests itself before the pretty colors on radar or before the rain starts falling. So when you have convective elements during the summertime and you have strong gusty winds, lightning, in many instances, you can have fatalities long before the storm itself, and by storm I'm defining it as the rainfall, actually arrives. So you've got play ongoing while there are dangerous conditions, lightning in the area, winds going on, and then suddenly the rain starts to fall. Then they start thinking about stopping the game. So there is a sort of a misapplication of weather knowledge here where the umpires feel like the only danger occurs when it's raining. And if it's not raining, then you can't be struck by lightning or you can't be injured in wind. And of course, when you wait until the rain starts falling, now there is an individual group of people who are required by their jobs to run out onto the field and make sure that the field can be readied for play when the rains end. And that's the groundskeepers. And the groundskeepers are the ones that are really almost every night in the summertime being put into harm's way. And I know we were talking before we went on air. We're sitting here monitoring a number of storms and lightning that are approaching PNC Park in Pittsburgh. The Pirates and the Cardinals are playing currently. They are in the third inning, and lightning now, I think when we first started talking, was 50 miles out. It is now 25 miles out. So that gap has been closed, and those storms continue to move toward the ballpark. It'll be really interesting to see how long the umpires at that ballpark wait until that game is in a delay.
So is this problem specific to Major League Baseball, or are there other major sports like NFL or college that have this issue?
Major League Baseball is unbelievably behind the curve. There are numerous organizations out there that have reached out to help. One is the Event Safety Alliance. Another is the International Association of Venue Managers. These organizations have academies. I run the Severe Weather Summit for the Event Safety Alliance. We have it in Norman every year. We have had participation from other sports franchises, other sports. We've had individual sports teams from the National Football League contact us for help. The concert venue tours, the arenas, Georgia Dome, you name it. I mean, NASCAR, of course, in many of these instances, you had to have a bad thing happen. Like, for example, with NASCAR, it wasn't until they had a lightning fatality at Pocono Raceway that they got on board. But I'll say the other professional sports, NASCAR, et cetera, the golf folks, they do a phenomenal job. I don't know why it has taken Major League Baseball so long to realize the risk that they are putting people in.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. There's a venue out here called Red Rocks that they have concerts every night, and they're higher up. They're on the little foothill, and they have storms every night go over there, and they have a terrible plan where everyone gets rushed back to their cars. And of course, you can't do that with thousands of people when the storm starts. And I think it's the same thing for them. It's going to have to take a fatality for them to take action and do something about it.
And I wish I could say that we've been lucky and there haven't been fatalities, but that's simply not true. I mean, if you look at the Indiana stage collapse back when the State Fair stage collapsed at the Sugarland concert, you had multiple fatalities. This is a worldwide problem. We have various venues in Canada, in Belgium, in the U.S., in England, and, all over the planet that have had fatalities in weather because people misunderstood the risk. And how Major League Baseball, as a professional sports and supposedly fan-friendly organization, can continue to misread and misunderstand weather risk. It's in this day and age, it's mind-boggling. And like I said, the lawsuits are going to be in the tens of millions of dollars. Heck, for the Indiana stage collapse, it's 50 million and counting right now.
Wow.
And I guarantee you that if the Indiana State Fair had hired a meteorologist ahead of time, they could have paid for that meteorologist for perpetuity for less money than they paid out in the $50 million in litigation.
Wow. Yeah. I talked to the people over at Coors Field, which hosts the Rockies, which is a Major League Baseball team, and they outsource their weather to a private sector. I was wondering if you could talk about some of the things that individual clubs are doing to get weather information that they need.
Sure, and that's great, and I think I need to make a distinction here. When I say Major League Baseball, I'm talking about the the organization Major League Baseball, not the teams, because like you read in that rule, this is not something that is in the team's hands. So if the Rockies outsource to a private vendor, the private vendor can be screaming and yelling and stamping feet and saying, "Wow, it's not safe, it's not safe, it's not safe." But if the umpires decide that play will continue, then play continues. That's just the bottom line.
Wow.
And so many teams will have private providers, and there are a ton of fantastic private providers out there that do this. Other teams hire their own meteorologists. So I think the Minnesota Twins have their own meteorologist. The Cincinnati Reds have their own meteorologist. So some teams, the individual teams, are recognizing that this is a problem. But again, the only time when the club has jurisdiction is before the lineup cards are handed to the umpire. Once the lineup cards are handed in, it is out of their hands. You could have the best forecaster on the planet. Free agency and the best meteorologists all go to, the Yankees. And, they hire them and we're good and they're going to be right every time and on and on and on. And that's still not going to prevent fatalities because it's not in their hands once the lineup cards are handed in.
I don't think I realized there was such a distinction there before this podcast. Might that explain what happened there in Minnesota about a month or so ago? I think I saw you tweeting about lightning in the area, but they were still playing.
Yes, it happens almost every night. For example, the White Sox several years ago proactively canceled a game because they were in a high risk with a tornado outbreak possible. They just canceled the game, and that's up to the club, right? The game hasn't started. We're not there yet. And that was a very smart, proactive decision by the Chicago White Sox because that night the Chicago area did have tornadoes. Fast forward to this season, and you've got the game in Chicago with the White Sox with lightning and storms and everything else overhead, and they're trying to finish the ninth inning. It's not the White Sox fault. It's the umpire's fault. And so what we tend to see is that when the storms occur earlier in the game, the umpires seem to be more likely to, okay, well, let's wait it out and see what happens. But if this occurs in the 8th inning or the 9th inning, chances are they are going to play right through the hazard simply because, remember, there is that line in the rule book that says that directs the umpire-in-chief shall at all times try to complete a game. And so many of the instances that we find of egregious violations of weather safety protocol occur in the 8th and 9th innings right at the end of the game. And I will contend that this happens from Little League on up. Oh, it's the last inning. We can finish. We can get it in. We can, let my kid bat, whatever it is. But that happens all the way through Major League Baseball. And again, when it's the fact that professional weather information, it's become so highly technical with radar and satellite and detection systems and things like that, that it takes a professional meteorologist to interpret that information and do so on behalf of safety. An umpire is not trained to do that. An umpire is trained to do something else. And when you try to get an umpire to multitask in that kind of environment, you are asking for trouble. And it's almost nightly.
I mean, just from watching things on my own, just the whole mentality of, oh, we're near the end, let's finish, makes complete sense. Unfortunately, that's how people think. But wow,
Well,
I mean,
and another issue of this is the behavioral one. If you look at these videos, and whether it's a video from Seattle and they have a roof but it's not open but they have lightning, it could be the Detroit Tigers in a ninth inning with lightning, the White Sox in the ninth inning with lightning, on and on and on. What's really interesting are the fan reactions, because when there's lightning close by and thunder, they go crazy. They applaud. They ooh, they ah. But in the back of their mind, they're thinking that the game is still ongoing because it's safe. They don't ever process the fact that they're not in a safe situation. They make the assumption that, well, the game's still going on, therefore they must know something, and therefore they must think we're safe. And that is one of the biggest misconceptions, is that now you've put thousands, tens of thousands of people in a position to believe falsely in their own safety because umpires have chosen to let the game continue.
that is alarming. Now, do you think part of this, the reason this exists, is because people still think weather forecasters are inaccurate and we don't know what we're doing?
I think that a lot of people still think that you have to be in a torrential downpour to be killed by lightning. A lot of situations are that people just misunderstand the threat. You almost, and this is social science literature here, you almost have to experience it before you respect it. And if you've never been hit by lightning, chances are you will then go through life assuming that you will never be hit by lightning. If you've never been hit by a hurricane, then you're likely to hang on and stay and not evacuate. If you've never experienced a tornado, chances are you have this false sense of security that it will never happen to you. And so experience as a teacher in these extreme events is problematic, because not everybody is going to experience a hurricane, a tornado, or lightning, or be killed in weather. It's not until after it happens that you go, oh my gosh, we should have done something differently. And then that feeds back to what we talked about earlier, which is that we tend to operate in response mode rather than in proactive mode.
Full disclosure, I am a devout volunteer with Little League, and I just finished the regionals in Bristol, Connecticut. And one thing that I've been proud of in the last few years is how we've been able to take hold of the weather guidance. Me and another meteorologist are both public address announcers, and we do a number of things in game operations, but one is the weather guidance. And as ridiculous as this might sound, I have a Little League Baseball rule book in my hand, and there's actually a full 2 pages on lightning safety, Appendix A. And within that, it says who should monitor the weather and who is responsible for making the decisions. And it says lightning safety plans should specify that someone be designated to monitor the weather for lightning, and the lightning monitor should not include the coaches, umpires, or referees, as they are not able to devote the attention needed to adequately monitor conditions. The lightning monitor must know the plan's guidelines and be empowered to assure that those guidelines are followed. So that's some pretty strong language in there.
Right, and where that comes from are the organizations that I mentioned earlier, the Event Safety Alliance, the International Association of Venue Managers. One I did not mention, and maybe the most important piece here, is the National Center for Spectator Sports Safety and Security, NCS4. They are in Hattiesburg at Southern Mississippi University. They have produced, with community help, lots of helpers, guidebooks for outdoor events. And what you just read, Little League has taken the playbook from NCS4, which are the recommendations from NCS4 as it pertains to lightning and lightning policies. And you're seeing the NCAA adopt that. You're seeing NAIA adopt that. You're seeing the Olympics adopt that. Little League Baseball adopt it. The NFL, et cetera. And again, these are all out there as best practices. And this is why it is so frustrating that Major League Baseball can't seem to grasp this concept.
Now, when it comes to college football or other sports, maybe in other times of the year, do you see similar issues? I mean, how do football games work at ORU if lightning approaches?
So one of the things that was a challenge back in the day is that, of course, the TV networks being involved in these activities make it very, very difficult.
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes. Challenging because they have specific windows for the games, and if you delay it, then it gets out of that window, gets into different advertising ratings depending upon and amounts, that they can charge advertisers for different time blocks, etc. But I will say that at the University of Oklahoma, we have so much support, not only from our administration, but from our athletics administration. We've got some of the best athletics people on the planet, and they have been very quick to adopt the expertise of professional meteorologists in all weather decision making and deferring those decisions to the expertise. And I think that needs to happen in more places. I will say, like we mentioned earlier, not all places have that expertise. There are, like for example, at OU, not only do we have meteorology on site in emergency preparedness, but we also use a service. And we have individuals from that service also on site. And that allows us to be very comprehensive in monitoring for multiple hazards. Because whenever we have storms here in Oklahoma, it's not going to be one hazard. It's going to be hail, it's going to be wind, it's going to be lightning. And it is very nice to have multiple people all with different specific responsibilities. And we use a service for that. And they are fantastic on game day. They sit right next to us in the ops center. And so we're all on the same page. And our athletic administration is very, very receptive to the expertise. And so we, for example, last year, nationally televised game against Ohio State in Norman, we pushed it back an hour and a half so that we could get out of the lightning window. In other words, what we try to do, we don't like, if we know that risk is coming at a certain point, we would rather move the entire experience and make the entire experience risk-free, even if that means kicking off at a different time and then working with the television networks accordingly. We'd rather do that than knowingly go into a situation where we know in the middle of the second quarter or the third quarter or whenever we are going to have to pull everybody off the field for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it is, and then put everybody back. That doesn't do anybody any good. So we've been very good at identifying risk and moving our entire game day experience out of the risk window. And right now, we may be one of the few universities that have actually done that. Now, I will say other universities have moved games like with approaching storms, hurricanes, like Florida and LSU did last year. They not only moved the game time, they moved the game venue. They completely moved it, to the other location. So more and more NCAA colleges and universities are embracing professional meteorological expertise in decision making, and that's a fantastic trend.
And certainly when you have such a large crowd, that advance change in the start time, I think, is important. It's much easier to do that than scatter tens of thousands of people within a few minutes.
Yes, you are absolutely correct. And when we have control over the situation, we can minimize risk. If we wait until the hazard presents itself, then we've lost control of the situation. I can go all the way back to 1929 when the Yankees were playing the Red Sox in Yankee Stadium. And because Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth were coming up in the bottom of the fifth, the umpires in 1929 decided, you know what, we're going to give these 50,000 people what they came for, and they came to see Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig hit. Well, as soon as those guys hit in the bottom of the fifth inning, then the storm comes, you have a stampede, you have 2 fatalities, and so this has been a part of the fabric of baseball for, almost 100 years now. It goes all the way back to 1929 with fatalities at Yankee Stadium in weather because they waited too long.
So what do we do moving forward as a community for Major League Baseball and for other venues that don't have a proper protocol in place? What does the community do to push these venues to get that protocol in place?
I think it happens both ways. I think it has to happen by word of mouth from the people who are attending these symposia, from ESA, from IAVM, from NCS4, you know, all of these things that are available. We get a lot of traffic by word of mouth, and that's, you know, sort of preaching the gospel one individual at a time. Now, remember I said earlier, we've got 5 universities with university meteorologists, and there are 4,000 campuses. At some point, we are going to see disasters at other places beat us to the punch. And I'm afraid that's the situation we're in. When you continue to sort of preach the message, push the message, you're making headway, like I said, in football and in colleges and college football and so on, but we're not making headway in baseball. I think it's going to be incumbent upon the teams who have hired weather expertise to go to New York, make that presentation in front of the rules committee, bring in professional meteorologists, and show them the kinds of things that can go wrong and the amount of money that will be spent in litigation. And I'm not sure that's been done. I don't think that somebody's actually sat down with Sandy Alderson, the chair of the rules committee, and we always say to Sandy Alderson, hire a Met. Hire a Met. Of course, he is the GM of the Mets, and so we hope that that resonates, that Mets should be meteorologists, not just the Metropolitans from a standpoint of the baseball. But we're going to have to continue to push. I think we'll have to continue to push with social media, with, like I said, the teams, and the teams finally saying, look, these are our responsibility. These folks are in our place, in our venue. They are our responsibility. We need to take care of them. Because we have a standard of care. And until the teams get a little bit more vocal, I think we'll see the same kind of thing until a disaster happens.
Well, I hope to see some change in MLB and other places. But in the time being, I will continue to plea with the Rockies, or I guess not the Rockies, but MLB. I know many meteorologists on Twitter have been pretty vocal with them. And some have even sent letters, I believe, to the commissioner. So hopefully we can keep that up. I don't know how much of an impact that has, but it's still encouraging to see. I wanted to change the subject a little bit here and ask you kind of a random question. So we're talking about MLB and other venues that aren't reacting, aren't, I guess, preparing for something like weather before something bad happens. Do you see a similar analogy here when it comes to climate and how we as a nation and a world are preparing for climate change?
Yes. Invisible threats, you know, and one of the things in the climate realm that is problematic is that there is a complete misunderstanding between the difference between weather and climate. So people think climate is going to happen to them, and that's just not the case. Remember, climate is nothing but a mathematical construct. Climate only exists in a spreadsheet in a computer. It's the weather that is the day-to-day. And if you can't show that a changing climate will mean a different hazard profile, and do that within the time frame of the decision makers, 2 years for the House, 4 years for the president, 6 years for the Senate. If you can't prove it's a near-term threat, you're not going to get anywhere, because everybody is all about the near-term threat. What's the threat today? And you can't really say, you know what, climate change is going to be the issue today. You know, we're saying climate change is going to be the issue a decade from now, a quarter of a century from now, and so on and so forth, that these things are going to happen. And so people immediately just turn that off because they're like, yeah, right. You know, that whatever, that's down the road. Not going to worry about it right now. We got other things. And so we automatically disqualify ourselves from action, I think, by the way in which we characterize the risk and the threat. And that's a challenge because, again, climate only exists in a spreadsheet. It does not exist that something you go out and feel.
Each week we end the podcast with an advice question, and that question is, what advice would you have for someone considering studying meteorology or someone already studying it at a university?
I would have said something different a long time ago. And I would have talked about math and physics and those kinds of things. But when people ask me that question now, I think, wow, I should have learned more about decision making and cost loss and weighing the costs of decisions, getting more involved on the economic side, the policy side, especially environmental policy. But if you're not really dealing on some of these social concerns, social behavioral, how people make decisions, what makes people act, what makes people evacuate, and getting involved in those kind of more social sciences, you're not going to be a good meteorologist. You will not understand the people that you forecast for unless you get immersed in the decision-making process. So I think for anybody that wants to be a meteorologist, that means everything from risk communication to how to deal with social media and contain that message in 140 characters. There are now classes on how to do that. I need to take them because I'm seemingly always over the 140 characters, and then I have to take words out. So I need to learn how to do that better. It's obvious we haven't learned how to do it with Major League Baseball. So there's a key out there. You asked that question earlier. I didn't have a good answer for you. And I think that's part of the learning process. We need to learn what that is. So social sciences, risk communication, decision making.
Great advice. Diversify yourself. Always great advice. Dr. Kloesel, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Oh my gosh, it was my pleasure. It was an honor to be here. Thank you.
Where can people find you on social media or on the internet?
I have two Twitter feeds that I handle here. One is the work feed for the University of Oklahoma. That is OU Emergency Prep. That's a Twitter feed. So we're always available at OU Emergency Prep for questions about venues, about forecasting. My personal is Texas Embassy. And of course, that harkens back to my Longhorn-ness here in central Oklahoma. So I'm also available on Facebook, and it's just Kevin Kloesel, Kloesel. There are two of us out there, so you'll find mine pretty easily. It's the one that's all about weather. So
go ahead and give Dr. Kloesel a follow on those Twitter accounts. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we're at the WX Junkies. We're also on Facebook. Give us a like there. If you want to listen to this podcast, you can listen on iTunes, Stitcher, pretty much any podcast platform. And if you're listening right now, go ahead and give us a rating or review. We'd really appreciate it. Tyler, what can we expect in the next month as it comes to guests?
So next week, we have Ben Reppert on the show. He is currently on the staff at Penn State, a student who turned into a staff member. So we're excited to have him on the show. We'll talk a little bit about Weather World, which is the long-running show there at Penn State. And we also have a number of guests booked in the coming month of September, including a meteorologist from the National Weather Service and an undergraduate student. So we have a number of guests already booked. We're excited for the next month, but that'll do it for this edition of the Weather Junkies. On behalf of Dr. Kevin Kloesel and Dakota Smith and myself, thank you for listening, and we hope you'll join us right back here next week.
Cow. I gotta go, Julia. We got cows.